Good day, friends of Buzzy. This is December 1st, 2021, and it is time to go on and on about Omicron. So Omicron, first of all, has a fantastic name. I think we all have to admit that if you're going to have a sci-fi dystopian name, a variant, Omicron sounds like it's a worthy adversary. Two of the names that they could have used in the Greek alphabet, C and Nu, I think, were skipped over for various reasons. So Omicron is the one that's getting all the hype. And I, for one, think that's excellent. It reminds me of something from the Marvel Universe. What about its danger? And am I being too flippant? Probably not, actually. So let's talk about what we know about Omicron, what matters, and what this means going forward. Everything in life is about survival, and the virus community is no different. They want to spread as widely as possible. So the SARS-CoV-2 virus is trying to spread as widely as possible, meaning that it wants to be as infectious as possible. But just like with SARS-1 and MERS, if you kill people, they don't spread your disease. Therefore, as happened with the 1918 flu, it's still around. It's just called H1N1 now, but it's not as deadly. So it's able to stay in circulation, and we're not getting all hyped about H1N1, even though, yeah, it does kill about, I don't actually remember, 1 in 1,000. It's about 3 times less deadly than the most recent data on Delta. So anyway, so Alpha was more transmissible than the initial strain of SARS-CoV-2, and Delta is about 3 to 5 times more transmissible than Alpha. And they're estimating that Omicron may be someplace in the nature of 10 to 100 times more transmissible. The thing is, what we're hearing is that it is not causing severe disease in South Africa. There is only one hospitalization that I've heard of associated with it. I'm sure there are more. We're going to know more in 3 weeks, but the overwhelming likelihood is that because it is more transmissible, it is less deadly. If it were really causing problems, it would be hospitalizing people and it would have been found more easily. Now, do we need to worry about Omicron, and what is the deal with it? So the reason people are so excited about it is because our vaccines and our monoclonal antibodies are grabbing onto the sort of Y part of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So it has a little stalk, and then this area is what gets on the ACE2 receptor that then has to be cleaved open and split, and it's called a Ferran cleavage. And that Ferran cleavage, which is done by proteases like the TMPRSS2, so it gets stuck to the ACE2 receptor, and then part of the cell wall splits it so it can go vloop and get inside the cell. I'm pretty sure that's the sound it makes. So this vloop part, when it cleaves and gets inside the cell, that cleavage is interrupted by most of our antibodies. Most of the antibodies are sticking to the stalk at that little cleavage part of the virus, and they're making it so it can't split. Some of them are actually, getting into the Y part so that it can't stick on the ACE2 receptor. So when we worry about mutations, we worry about the fact that it has changed shape physically so that the antibodies can no longer grab onto it. In this Ferran cleavage area, this, flunk part, that's where the most heavily concentrated number of mutations are, which means that, yeah, a lot of our vaccines are not going to hit it. Now, it also means that for sure, it's either a yes or no on the antibodies. So there's a company called Adagio that's making an immunoglobulin, an antibody, and theirs does seem to work. Theirs is targeting an area that's not impacted by all these Ferran area mutations. The other antibodies that are out there, Regeneron's, yes, their antibody doesn't work anymore. Their monoclonal antibody will not work against Omicron. And the other antibodies that are out there in the vaccines, the thing is, the monoclonal antibodies are just either going to work or not work, because they are one Lego piece that fits in another Lego piece. And if the receptacle for the Lego piece doesn't fit, they're just not going to work. So our monoclonal antibodies, by and large, are toast. Our vaccines, though, we're still at a place where our T cell memory is going to be able to adapt and make antibodies even with these variants. So you might get mildly sick, but your T cells are already revved up and ready to go, and they're like, okay, that's not working as well. They can shift really quickly and make something. This is one of the hypotheses that we have had since the beginning, that it would explain why pediatricians like myself did not get the virus as easily, but the pediatricians who were in the neonatal ICUs, they did get the virus, because we as pediatricians have been exposed to so many coronaviruses that our T cells were able to adapt enough that we never got sick. Whereas in the ICU, those doctors are not exposed to colds and coronaviruses. They're not soaking in it like palm olive, because their babies are all brand new and not little established germ balls that are picking up stuff from everybody in their school class. So I digress, but this T cell thing really is important, because what it says is that vaccines matter more than ever. And indeed, it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks to be sure on this, but the data that we're getting out of Israel is the best, because almost everyone there is vaccinated. And so far, it seems like the vaccinated, and especially the triple vaccinated people, are not being bothered by Omicron. This is part of why everyone is putting in these restrictions for travel that are vaccine based, because if you are not vaccinated, you are going to catch this, period. 100%, you're going to get Omicron, because it's so insanely transmissible, and it's aerosol and it's everywhere around you. But if you are vaccinated, then your T cells should be able to take care of any of the viral particles they encounter and deal with them without you getting sick. Or at least if you got sick, it's going to be mildly sick. So the best way to keep from getting even mildly sick is go back to our original preventative measures: masks, hand washing, but air circulation. So keeping air circulating. So since we have last talked, there have been a couple interesting papers. One of the interesting papers found that looking at a meta-analysis of all of these studies, was that hand washing was only about 12% of reducing your likelihood of catching COVID. Masks were about 68%, and distancing was someplace in the 62% range. So masking seemed to be the most effective accounted for most of the preventing getting the virus. Now, I will say it didn't look at ventilation, because that wasn't something that was an explicit and able to be randomized type thing. So for our business, what we're doing, thanks to Omicron, is we're going back to the place where if we are within 6 feet of each other, so if we're sitting at a table close to each other, then we're masking. If we're not, we're not. And if we have more of a density than 4 people in our 1,400 square foot area, we're turning on the air circulator, the HEPA filter. And if we have more than 6 people, then we're opening up a window. So your mileage may vary, but that is what I have decided based on the literature that we're going to do for our team here. So to recap, closer than 6 feet, masking, more than 4 people, HEPA filter, more than 6 people, also crack a window. All right, so that was one interesting paper. The other paper was putting a nail in the coffin of this, oh, it's better to just catch it than it is to get vaccinated. So again, in Israel, looking at the people who were triple vaccinated versus those who were double vaccinated, the risk of catching it for the triple vaccinated was decreased about 5 times compared to those who were not. and looking at the people who caught the virus as opposed to those who were vaccinated in a different study, it was a 15 times lower risk of catching it again if you were vaccinated than if you had caught it once to begin with. So vaccines for the win across the board. Now, final piece of interesting information. Everyone's been asking about the nasal irrigation study. Well, I kind of backed away from it while everybody was freaking out about ivermectin and about betadine up the nose. But I'm back in the saddle now because two things happened. One thing is that a paper cited our paper. So this is another preprint, but this preprint was in bioRxiv, like medRxiv. medRxiv is what ours is in. bioRxiv is more of a basic science type thing. And what they did was they actually found that this furin cleaving, the root where it goes across so it can get inside the cell, that nasal saline inhibited it. That now they used hypertonic. So instead of being 0.9% salt, it was 1.8, but they used extra salty water, but that amount of salt moderately inhibited the ability of the virus to split and go in. And so this furin cleavage thing is particularly important because Omicron has its mutations on the furin cleavage spot, and seems like salt water may inhibit the splitting at this furin cleavage spot. So we're back in the place that it seems like the nasal saline irrigation is going to be a useful intervention. So I'm putting it in and going to get it submitted to a paper, to get it submitted to a journal, hopefully soon. All right, so those are all of the updates that I have. I am traveling this weekend. I have traveled. I will take my nasal irrigation with me. I will take betadine. And I'm thinking I might do 2 salt pods. I think I may go double the salt for a little while just to see how this pans out. But I am not worried about being around people for Christmas. We're still going to insist on everybody be vaccinated and probably do tests, rapid tests, just to see antigen tests right before everybody gets together. I think that's going to be fine. I think that once you've had a negative antigen test, you can hang out with your pod and not worry about the windows and everything else. If you go out to someplace else, then start doing the HEPA filter and the windows and the circulation of air again. Now, final thing is that we are going to switch from doing every other week Facebook Live to just doing once a month. And I will tell you that the next Facebook Live, unless there's a whole bunch of new COVID stuff that I need to tell you, the next Facebook Live, we're going to talk about decreasing opioids, our pain care package, and the ways that people who've got chronic pain who are going into surgery, how it works to decrease opioid use by your planning ahead of time, and how coaching and expectation management is really the best way to reduce opioid use. So we're switching our gears. If you've got any questions on vaccines or COVID or nasal irrigation or anything else, as always, please send us a Facebook or an Instagram comment to Buzzy Helps or info@paincarelabs.com. And if you've got any questions about nasal irrigation or want to see it, go see our other videos, like, subscribe, because that's what you say. And thank you all. And I am not worried about Omicron. It's going to be fine.